Doctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very interesting comments about what the future in the Middle East might look like. As always, the Middle East, we are the land of illusions, mirages, the lands of crisis. We do have major ones. People nowadays look at the Middle East and say we have the problems in Yemen, in Sudan, in Libya, in Lebanon, in Syria. Indeed, we have many. But if you look at the history, we've had them for the longest time, even before the Crusaders visited us, came to our region. Let me focus on my area of expertise, which is food security. Yes, we have problems with population growth in some countries. In Egypt, for example, you have to feed 3 million mouths every year, which is a challenge, of course, for the government. And tied to it nowadays, we have the other problem, not of hunger, but of obesity and diseases. We have one of the largest diabetes rates in the world, between Saudi and UAE. And people are living younger, so governments have to spend more and more of their budgets on addressing the human cost of these diseases. And then, in addition to that, our lands, regretfully, we only have about 9% of our land that's ready and fit for agriculture. We do have places where we historically had water. You know, the Nile River, of course, Iraq, Bilad Mabain al-Nahrain, that used to be the food basket of the region. But in both of these countries, for example, in the Nile, if it wasn't for diplomacy, we would have had a war between Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan, and everyone in between. And when it comes to Iraq and Turkey's relationship, and we do have our expert here, is also a challenging area. In Lebanon, where I'm originally from, the Litani water is of interest to the Israelis and others. Within the GCC, we've been using our aquifer. Also in Egypt, we've been using that because the solution has been land reclamation. Thank God the technology allows us to do land reclamation. But of course, you don't have infinite water underground. Within 100 to 200 years, they will be probably affected. And indeed, His Highness before has mentioned that for us, water is more expensive and more important than oil. So that brings us to my area, food security. You know, since COVID, add to it the Ukraine-Russia conflict, we realized we cannot depend on external importing of food. Gone is the idea that food security is about availability and affordability. It used to be the case. It's no longer only the case. We went beyond that to say we need to have self-sufficiency. And with self-sufficiency comes the issue of what we are going to call social impact investments in agriculture, whereby essentially you are doing two things. Making sure we have local food produced locally, which generally is going to be healthy, from what we call farm to fork in under 3 to 5 days. Okay. The second thing, also in relation to this critical point, is getting in the areas where we have population, such as Iraq, Egypt, and others, farmers to work. Okay. And farmers to work is a big challenge because we know, even in Europe, Treaty of Rome, back many years back, those who used to live in France or visit, I remember every summer the French farmers would block the Champs-Élysées. So you can upset bankers, they will sue you. But if you upset farmers, they will revolt, you know. So these two issues were the area of now food security is coming. Let's have these projects, such as the one we did in Qatar, the one we did now, we're doing in Egypt, whereby you work with local farmers, but you create these massive projects to ensure self-sufficiency. In Qatar, yes, we used technology. We flew in cows. It was challenging, but it worked. They achieved self-sufficiency in dairy. In Egypt now, we are reclaiming the desert, and we are achieving self-sufficiency in sugar within 2 years. Of course, it's not easy, because these projects involve the private sector as well as the public sector, and hence public-private partnership. The problem with this public-private partnership is the mismatch between the expectation of the private and the expectation of the public. The public, they like big projects, multi-billion, big-time announcement, largest, biggest, what have you. The private, they'd like managed risk, scale up, let's study it properly, let's roll it. The public is impact on immediate employment as a key driver, as well as reducing the government need for foreign currency. The private is looking again at route to market, making sure what we produce is actually consumed and is consumed wisely. So now the challenge we are facing is managing this mismatch between the private sector expectations and needs and the public sector expectations and needs. It will be interesting times because every country almost identifies food security or insecurity as a critical factor. Indeed, in some of the countries, we have ministry now of food security. Okay, the private sector is looking at it, but the challenge with the private sector is that every agent in the private sector thinks they can be billionaires overnight in agriculture, when we all know that agriculture is a long-term investment, is not like flipping a stock. And the third challenge is the people's habits, our obesity issues and people not consuming wisely, but throwing 30% of the food that come to their tables will be another challenge for us in the Middle East. The iftar, famous Ramadan iftar tables are just one example of the kind of food habits that are not good in terms of the managing the consumption. And then the obesity level is another example of the unhealthy insecurity or insecure food habits that we have in the region. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield to my colleague.